Here's everything you need to know about relapse. What happens when you are trying to overcome your addiction and then the dreaded thing happens that you're trying to prevent? A relapse. Unfortunately, there are a lot of ideas about this going around that are really not helpful and that actually make future relapses more likely instead of less likely. So let's clear that up. In this video, let's set the record straight to discover exactly what a relapse means, what it doesn't mean, and what you can do to prevent future relapses. Let's get right into it. The first and most important thing is that you have to realize that a relapse is not a reset to zero. Of course, it can feel like a reset to zero because if you're counting your days and you're building up a streak and you feel proud because you've managed 10 days or 20 days or 30 days or whatever your streak duration is, and now a relapse has happened, and yes, you have to reset your streak count to zero. That's the only way to be honest with yourself. So yes, it is true that if you were at, let's say, 30 days porn-free before, and today you looked at something pornographic, you are back to day zero on your streak. There's no way around that. But this is the important thing, that does not mean that your progress resets to zero. What I mean by that is, the progress that you're after, what you're trying to do is not just build up a streak count. What you're trying to do is you're trying to overcome this addiction. You are trying to heal your brain, change the wiring in your brain so that you're no longer addicted. And that progress does not reset to zero on a relapse. The best way to understand this is to think of what happens when you go to the gym. Let's say you start going to the gym and you lift weights every day with the goal of building strength and building muscle. Now, as you know, you won't just go to the gym once and then suddenly you're stronger and more muscular, because this is a progress that takes time. It takes time for your muscles to adapt to the stress of all the training you're doing, and slowly over time you grow stronger and you build muscle mass. Now, let's say you've been doing that for a while, you've made some gains, and then you skip gym once. Does that mean you've suddenly lost all your gains and you have to start from scratch? You have to start right at the beginning of your training program again? No, of course not. Skipping a workout is a problem for you to reach your goals, but it's not because one single exception destroys all your gains. It's because one exception can easily become 2 exceptions and 3 exceptions and so on. The real risk here is that it's a slippery slope, right? If you allowed yourself to be lazy today, then tomorrow you go, you know what, I'll take 2 days off. And before you know it, you've been lazy or you've been making excuses for several weeks, and now you've lost all your gains. Quitting an addiction and the effects it has on your brain are quite similar. So as you stay free from your addiction, your brain slowly starts to change. Those habit pathways in your brain slowly start to change as you don't constantly engage with the addictive behavior anymore. And it's basically the opposite of working out. What you're doing is you're atrophying those pathways in your brain. They're getting weaker and weaker and weaker over time. Now, when you relapse once, you're re-engaging with that habit pathway in your brain. You're giving it some juice again, so to speak. You're strengthening it again, but it's not a single relapse that resets all the progress you've made. The real risk is that one relapse becomes 2, becomes 3, becomes a massive porn binge, and then you lose all your progress. So see how this is exactly the same thing? Because in both cases, it's a biological process that gradually happens over time. It's important to realize that a single relapse does not reset your progress to zero, because that is exactly what turns it into an excuse for an extended binge. So if you go, yeah, I lost my 30-day or 50-day or whatever porn-free streak, so now I might as well binge. And I might as well keep going for a few days or maybe a few weeks because I have to start from zero anyway, and does it really matter whether I start from zero today or next week? This is how the belief that it resets you to zero becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because you end up binging your way back to square one. So the reality is simply this: a relapse does not reset your progress to zero, but it does put you at high risk of setting yourself back to zero by getting back into the addiction. The most important thing is to get back on your streak as quickly as possible. Really, your success mostly depends on how quickly can you get back to your good habits. The second thing that most people misunderstand about relapses is that even if you experience relapses, you may be making progress. And this can be a bit difficult to understand. Look, ideally, we'd all like to quit and simply never relapse and be clean for the rest of our lives. And with the right tools in place, your chances of being able to do that are certainly better than if you don't have tools and strategies at your disposal. And by the way, if you want to learn the most effective 21-day program for overcoming porn addiction, make sure you check the first link in the description, which takes you to the page where you can get the Quit by Healing program. It contains all of the strategies that work the best to get you porn-free as quickly as possible. But having said that, even with the best strategies, even with all the right tools, in reality, most people will experience some relapses on their path to recovery. But there's still a difference between whether you're doing it right or wrong. And here's what I mean. If all you do is try to overcome your addiction by trying really hard, so you're trying really hard to abstain, then what you'll probably find is that you're in some form of a cycle that seems to put you back at your starting point again and again. So you'll probably experience that you're like gritting your teeth, trying to stay away from the thing for as long as possible. And then after 10 days or 20 days or whatever, after some period, it feels like there's pressure building up. It becomes too much. You can't take it anymore. You relapse, you go on a binge of maybe a few days, and then you try to quit again. And you're just stuck in that cycle and you're making absolutely no progress. And that's because indeed, you're not making progress. The solution to this is you need to implement all 4 pillars of addiction recovery, which is you need to have a strong why, a clearly defined reason and purpose for why you want to quit. Then you need to abstain from your addiction. Then you need to build replacement habits that give you a healthy form of the dopamine that you've been getting from your addiction. And very importantly, you need to be doing the internal work to actually find and address the underlying issues that made you an addict in the first place. If these ideas are new to you, make sure you subscribe to this channel and also check out this video on the 4 pillars in more detail. When you implement all 4 pillars, what you'll note is that over time, it takes more and more to make you relapse. So initially, if you are fully addicted and you have really strong porn brain, then the smallest thing will trigger you. Everything will make you want to immediately jump into your addiction. As you implement the 4 pillars and you slowly heal your brain, what you'll notice is that over time, it is usually stressful events, bad days, bad news, things happening to you that are somehow difficult to deal with. Those are the things that actually make you relapse. So it's no longer sexual triggers, it is usually stress. And this is unsurprising because addiction is a coping mechanism, and like stressful, painful experiences, difficult emotions are what we use the addiction to avoid. And what you'll notice is that as you do the healing, it takes larger and larger negative events, higher and higher levels of stress to even make you consider relapsing. And this is a sign of progress. If this happens, if you notice like, okay, it used to be just one difficult conversation with someone and I'd have all these urges and I could barely stand it anymore. And now you got some really bad news. I don't know, you got fired from your job or something. And now you're feeling the urge. It's like, well, that's a much higher level of stress. And it shows you that all of these lower stressors are no longer triggering you. It takes more and more to even get that out. So again, this shows you that if it happens, you still have to reset your streak count to 0 if you're still counting the days, but you can still observe what is happening and start learning more about what is triggering you, and you can see whether or not you're actually making progress here. Which brings me to the final point, how to prevent relapses from happening at all. So apart from everything in the 4 pillars, these are the things you have to put in place to actually make progress and heal your brain, and over time that makes you less and less likely to relapse. What else can you do? Well, the most important thing to do is to bring awareness to what's happening, which means that you need to be engaging with the things that give you urges, with the things that trigger you, and with the things that make you relapse. This is counterintuitive because a relapse generally makes you feel bad. And because you don't want to feel bad, it's almost like you want to shove it out of your awareness. I'd rather not think about that and hope that it doesn't happen again. But in order to prevent future relapses, you have to do the opposite. You have to essentially like take this thing, go, okay, what happened here? And like zoom in and figure out what happened, what's going on. The best way to do this is to do it in writing. So write about exactly what happened. Where was I? How was I feeling? What happened externally? What happened internally? What thoughts and emotions were going on inside me? Exactly what happened that led to the relapse. If you write out all the details and figure out exactly what triggered you and figure out exactly how you got yourself down the slippery slope of ignoring the part of you that says, hey, we shouldn't be doing this anymore, then you can do 2 things. First of all, you can learn from it and you can put things in place. You can change your environment to make sure that the same things won't trigger you again in the future. There's a separate video here that talks more about context-dependent cravings and why being aware of your environment and changing your environment is such a powerful tool for overcoming addictions. And secondly, by engaging with what happens, you're also training your awareness to notice these things as they happen next time. So by really looking at, okay, how did I feel? What thoughts went through my head? Where was I? What stressor triggered me? The next time something similar happens, you will notice it as it's happening instead of only afterwards. And that means you have a chance to stop yourself in your tracks before autopilot mode takes over and you find yourself having relapsed once again. And here's the good news. You don't have to wait for your next relapse before you do this. You can do it right now by examining the last time you relapsed. So this is an exercise you can do right now. You can think about what exactly happened last time I relapsed, when was it, and so on. Just write about all the details and then figure out exactly what triggered me and what can I do right now to make sure the same thing won't happen again in the future. And by the way, if you join the Quit by Healing community, in there you will find my introspective writing crash course, which teaches you the basic approach of how to do this type of writing. And the more you do this kind of writing, the more you're cultivating your awareness, the more you can stay present as things trigger you and not be taken over by your urges. So the answer to what can you do to prevent future relapses really is awareness. And the way to cultivate awareness is introspective writing. So to learn more about that, check out the link in the description that goes to the Quit by Healing community, which you can join for free. So these are the 3 most important things you need to know about relapses to destroy the beliefs that get you to turn a relapse into an excuse for binging and resetting all the way to 0, and to make sure that future relapses are less likely. If you have any questions about this, go ahead and leave a comment below. And also, if you appreciate the content I put out, one of the best things you can do to help me spread the word is simply all the engagement stuff. So click the like button, leave a comment, let the algorithm know that this is content that needs to be shown to more people. It makes a huge difference.